Let's bring in Caitlin Huey-Burns. She's a CBSN political contributor and a national political reporter for Real Clear Politics. She joins us now from the Hill. And Caitlin, obviously, there's been an outpouring of support for Senator McCain following this diagnosis from both sides of the aisle. Talk about the reaction you're hearing from lawmakers and aides there in Washington.
Sure. Well, good morning. Certainly an outpouring of bipartisan support, which, as you know, is kind of rare these days on Capitol Hill. But it really speaks to John McCain and his stature here. Has been a longtime member of Congress, of course. But as you alluded to earlier, he practices a kind of politics that is kind of rare these days, at least in recent memory. That clip that you just showed, can't really imagine that happening in this day and age. And also the way that he was very cordial with then Senator Obama while he was campaigning. When he received the Democratic nomination, John McCain ran an ad saying welcome to the competition, essentially. So a lot of outpouring of support here. And of course, John McCain is a figurehead as it pertains to policy, particularly foreign policy and foreign affairs and armed services. So his absence for the time being will be greatly missed, and lawmakers here are hoping he returns back safely and healthy.
Right. And meanwhile, Caitlin, the vote for the health care bill was sort of put on hold when it was thought that John McCain was only going to be out for a short period of time. Now it doesn't look like that's the case. We don't know what's going to happen. So things are moving forward. There's going to be a vote on the health care bill next week. What sort of impact, though, do you think the lack of having Senator McCain there, what sort of impact do you think it'll have on the plans?
Well, on these kinds of votes, as you know, there is little room for error, virtually none, just given the feedback that we're hearing from Republican lawmakers as it pertains to the path forward. And the path forward isn't necessarily clear at this point. There are lots of lawmakers here that actually do want to just have a vote on something to be able to then go back to their constituents and say, look, at least we voted, even if it doesn't pass here. There is a plan to move forward with a repeal and replace at a later date kind of scenario, which a lot of moderates are concerned about, just given those CBO numbers that we saw yesterday. But there is also a feeling here of kind of a slowed agenda at this point, and Republicans kind of concerned about the fact that we are, as of today, 6 months into the Trump administration with virtually no legislative accomplishments.
And Caitlin, I want to turn now to that wide-ranging interview the President of the United States gave to the New York Times, beginning with his comments about Attorney General Jeff Sessions and his recusal from the Russia probe. Let's take a listen, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Sessions should have never recused himself. And if he was going to recuse himself, he should have told me before he took the job, and I would have picked somebody else. It's extremely unfair, and that's a mild word, to the president.
Caitlin, we've already seen critics of the president come out and say this is just another example of him interfering with the independence of the Justice Department. I wonder what you're hearing from the Hill, from lawmakers, and from Republicans who have a very good and cordial relationship with Jeff Sessions when he was a senator, when he was a member of the Senate. What are you hearing about that?
Right. Well, Jeff Sessions not only was a longtime member of the Senate, but one of the earliest supporters of Donald Trump, really helped him throughout the campaign, not only in terms of policy, but also in terms of giving him some kind of credibility on behalf of a senator. Remember, at the time, and still throughout the campaign, the Trump campaign did not have support from the Republican Party. And at times, Jeff Sessions has been kind of an outlier, particularly in his views on immigration and other things. But this goes to show that the loyalty that is said to be prized by Donald Trump is not necessarily always returned. And so on Capitol Hill, you do have some concern among lawmakers about this prospect of either asking for Sessions' resignation or going so far as to criticize Robert Mueller, who is, of course, in charge of is special counsel in charge of that investigation. You also heard in that interview a little bit of concern expressed from the president, which is in turn concerning lawmakers. Yeah, you got to ask Chris Christie about how that loyalty is working out for him.
Really. So also in the interview, the president talked about that previously undisclosed conversation he had with Vladimir Putin during the dinner at the G20 in Germany. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Toward dessert, I went down just to say hello to Melania. And while I was there, I said hello to Putin. Really pleasantries more than anything else. was not a long conversation, but it was, could be 15 minutes, just talked about things. It was very interesting. We talked about adoption.
Adoption comes up again. Whole lot of adoption talk lately. Yeah. So, you heard the president. He said the conversation was mostly pleasantries and that they discussed Russian adoption. Is that explanation going to satisfy lawmakers, do you think?
Well, first of all, as you know, when he references adoption, they're not talking about adoption. The adoption was a response that the Russian government made to cut off adoptions to the United States, of course, after sanctions were placed on Russia. So when you hear the term adoption, it's really a conversation about sanctions. That's what you can kind of take away from it. What's important to consider about this meeting is the fact that over and over again, we've seen from the Trump administration and former Trump campaign, those involved in the campaign, failing to disclose these kinds of conversations. And these are some things that are easy to disclose. Just saying, oh, by the way, he had a pull aside with the president of Russia. Here is the readout from the meeting. They tend to do that with other meetings. So this draws a lot of concern, just given the fact that it's Russia, it's Putin, it's Trump. Of course, that raises a lot of eyebrows.
All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns of Real Clear Politics. As always, we thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you.